Well, also go back to Parliament for more reactions on this seminal ruling by the Speaker there, which has rendered 4 seats in Parliament as vacant, meaning that the minority, which about 30 or 35 minutes ago were in the minority and now in the majority, which is the NDC, because they have 136 seats as we speak, with the then majority, the MPP, which had 138, having now 135 seats in Parliament. Quite interesting development there. Evans, we have Rashid Rahman on the line, but you were making a point. Complete that point and we'll join.
Point, I mean, in terms of the implications of this, part of which we've just heard Kojo Brace talk about, there are a few major issues that needs to be resolved. One of them, obviously, is what happens to the second Deputy Speaker's position, because he's one of those people caught in this particular earth-shattering decision, as announced by the Speaker. That's the former MP and Siama, who until 30 minutes ago was the second Deputy Speaker of Parliament. Now, his particular case, if you look at the Constitution, it appears pretty clear-cut, because remember that he got into Parliament as an independent candidate. The Constitution says, Article 97(8) says, you vacate your seat if he, that's a member of Parliament, was elected a member of Parliament as an independent candidate and joins a political party. And so what has he done? He's been in Parliament as an independent candidate. That's how he was elected there. The members of the constituents voted for him as an independent candidate.
But Evans, remember, he was the same person whose ruling that Speaker Michael Quaid did that served as precedent for this ruling.
Yes, in 2020, says that
in 2020, he was in Parliament on the ticket of the MPP. And then having felt that he was cheated, he went to run as independent. Then the party petitioned the Speaker that, well, this party has run independent, he's over our party now. So his seat was declared vacant. So this is the second time his seat alone is being declared vacant. Quite interesting.
Very interesting indeed. But on the face of it, he should have known that if somebody had raised this matter, he was going to be caught in this particular work, because he got into Parliament as an independent candidate. He's now crossed carpet to the MPP. Because we know that in Fomena, he's now the parliamentary candidate for the MPP. And so for him, it's very clear-cut. And the lawyers who need to chip in here, I've heard a lot of legal opinion on the subject, but on the subject of the other 3, you have the 97G, which says that, of course, you vacate your seat if you leave the party of which he was a member at the time of his election to Parliament to join another party. That's the first part. Is that what has happened in this case? No. They haven't left the MPP to join NDC, PNC, so no. But the second part, or seeks to remain in Parliament as an independent member. The 3 of them, are they seeking to remain in this Parliament as independent members? That is where, I guess, the question is. Because the other side, one side says, yeah, they want to remain in this Parliament as independent candidates, right? But the other side says, no, but they want to be independent candidates in the next Parliament. That is, if they win this particular election that they're now seeking to contest as an independent candidate. So that's where, for me, the gray area is. And that is why we've seen that Afenyo Makin has gone to the Supreme Court to seek an interpretation to this particular clause in the Constitution. The Supreme Court obviously will have the final say on this. How quickly they can sit to deliberate on this matter, considering how big it's become, for me, is the big subject. Because remember, a few things will happen. You have, for the very first time in our history, and this is one of the bigger things here, for the first time in our history, you have an executive president who belongs to one party, and you have Parliament that is controlled by the opposition party for the very first time. And depending on how quickly, the Supreme Court has a final say, because if the Supreme Court then decides that, of course, what has happened to this is unconstitutional, you expect that the status quo will revert to type. But depending on when they sit, between now and December 7 is a long time. But we have to also look beyond December 7, because this Parliament's life only ends the midnight of January 7 into 7th, right? So this is monumental. You have the 2025 budget that will be read. This will have implications for So what is government business now? Who's going to run the government?
Well, they've indicated.
You have a majority leader, who normally we say is the leader of government business in Parliament. Now he's from the opposition. So is he still going to be the leader of government business? Of course not. Is he going to be the leader of opposition business? Which I believe is what is going to happen, because the NDC now will have their own agenda on a number of things they want to do, to prosecute now. And then, of course, the question then becomes, now they have the power to do a lot of things, right, in Parliament. But we also know, well, whatever bill you pass in Parliament has to go to the President for assent, right? So we're going to have a very interesting next few months up until that. And so really, if you're just joining us and wondering, what are we talking about? Our democratic architecture tonight just changed.
Yeah.
There has been a major earthquake in Parliament that has changed architecture. We haven't seen this before, where we have, as we speak tonight, the NDC is a majority in Parliament, and the MPP is in the minority. They have to wait what the Supreme Court will say on this particular subject before we can decide. And then, of course, what he says, what Okidetu says there, the entire arrangement in Parliament needs to change, because the committees are set up to reflect the majority-minority divide. So every committee will have more NPP members than the NDC members. Now that has to reverse. The NDC will take over the committees. Look at all the powerful committees: the Finance Committee, the Public Accounts Committee, obviously one that is controlled by the opposition party, the minority party already. But then they take over all the other key committees, and they can do a lot. Now, they failed. Just one more point before you bring it. Remember, they wanted to remove some of the ministers. For example, the vote of censure that had been raised. They couldn't, because they were in the minority. They can impeach the president.
Interesting.
I mean, so just imagine the room, and we don't have that kind of democracy where you have a lower and an upper chamber. This is just one chamber of Parliament. And really interesting times.
Yeah, very, very. But one person who also understands how Parliament, works is Dr. Rashid Rahman of the African Center for Parliamentary Affairs. He joins us via Zoom now. Grateful to you, Doc, for joining. Was this something you expected?
Yes.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes.
Yes, I was saying yes, it was something I expected. I mean, different interpretations have been given to the constitutional provision, including the gray kind of area that Evans was just explaining. But, in response to what Evans was saying, once people declare their intention to go independent or to contest on a ticket other than the party that they represent in Parliament, it presupposes that the relationship is already frosty. It presupposes that the relationship is broken. So, yes, it might be gray. It just simply says that they no longer belong to the party for which they are members in the House. But I believe maybe that might be one area that will need to be further maybe clarified by yes. And if we ever have a constitutional review, maybe this is one important candidate for review, because it's a very serious matter to declare people's seats vacant, and we need to make sure all shreds of ambiguity are taken away, so that when speakers rule, at least they are riding on provisions that are as clear as they can be.
Okay.
But let me say this, and this is a message that I keep telling the parties in Parliament and our MPs, that minorities change. We should be careful when we are setting precedents, because it might be convenient for you today, but you might wake up tomorrow and you are asked to swallow that same pill, and it might be much bitter than maybe when others were swallowing it, because yes, the speaker was not riding on precedent very much. He was saying the ruling of Speaker Okwe doesn't tie his hands.
Okay.
But if you listen to the sentiments of Ghanaians, I think people were saying what happened 4 years ago, and if we are still operating with the same constitution, must happen today. Difference being, however, that in 4 years ago, the party wrote to Parliament. But, the 7th Parliament is not the 8th Parliament. If the party writes to the Speaker now, they will be committing suicide. And I believe that is not something that the MPP wants to do at this time.
Okay.
So it's unfortunate that things have turned out this way. But I believe that we must uphold the rule of law. We must go by the Constitution. And now let the courts come in and let them tell us whether maybe the Right Honourable Speaker erred or somebody erred.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Doc, stay with me. Let me bring in the, Alexander Afenyo-Markin, who is the honourable member for F2. And also, just about an hour ago, he was the majority leader. Honourable, I'm grateful to you for joining us. I mean, for the first time, I saw you visibly angry on the floor. What's your next plan of action now? Okay. I think we've lost Afenyo there, but obviously, I mean, I've not seen him that angry before, but today he was. Let me bring in Draman again, then I'll come back to you. Dr. Draman, so the majority, or now the minority, have indicated clearly that they will not be doing business in the House. What will then happen?
Well, I think that's going to be quite difficult. Then our democracy is going to be crippled. And at a time when we are getting ready for elections, I believe that's not what the tension is already very high in this country, the political temperature. This is only going to heighten the temperature. And I think maybe some cool heads should prevail. I mean, like you said, we haven't seen the leader as visibly angry as he was today. I would say that perhaps he has to try and compose himself and maybe see if, because I think in all these, at the end of the day.
So, Doc, to help our discussion, let me bring in Alexander Afenyo-Markin now. Alexander Afenyo-Markin, I'm grateful to you for joining. What's your next line of action?
Alex?
Yeah.
Hello?
Oh, no, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
You let me hear how you introduce me again. Okay.
So we have Alexander Afenyo-Markin, MP for F2 on the line. Yes.
I'm not playing MP. Well, we either doing the right thing or we just go up. Please.
It's okay. Listen, this majority leader.
So, you are so I have the majority leader on the line, Alexander Afenyo-Markin. Is that okay?
Young man, why? Why do you do your journalism? You introduce somebody properly. And you don't make these things for me to remind you and all that. What do you gain from it? Is it okay for us to have a banter?
No. I have only said I have the majority.
You started with you have Alexander Afenyo-Markin. Then you say MP for F2. Then I have to remind you, please. Let's do the right thing. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. Forgive me.
Okay, so do the right thing and let's proceed.
Okay, so let me bring in Majority Leader Alexander Afenyo-Markin.
Yes, sir. Good evening to you for having me.
Great, thanks for speaking to us. So I was saying that for the first time I saw you very visibly angry on the floor.
I wasn't angry. Okay. I wasn't angry.
Okay. But what's your next plan of action in all of this?
Well, Mr. Speaker has expressed his opinion, as he said. This is democracy. We don't need to be breaking shoulders over this matter. We've already filed at the Supreme Court. So we await the hearing, and then we go to the court and abide by the decision of the court. That is all. We are not going into any further debate on this matter.
But I mean, if you don't go back to the House to do business, won't that affect government business in the House?
Hello?
Honorable, can you hear me?
Yes, please. It's better now.
Great. So I heard your side say you are not going to go to the House to do business. And I'm asking, if you don't do that, won't it affect government business that you want to champion in the House?
What has happened already affects government business.
Okay.
We can't do anything until the matter is finally determined. So let's wait for the determination of the matter.
Has the court
Thank you very much. I don't intend to go further on this.
Has the court decided when to sit on the case?
I don't want to go further on this. We are with the hearing and final determination of this matter.
So you mean you won't go to the House until this is declared?
I will speak no more, sir. I've made the point. Thank you very much.
Well, but okay. I'm grateful to you. That's the Alexander Fiamake Evans. I wanted him to stay on so we could ask him about what he makes of what the speaker says now, because his side, what has happened, are in the minority now. I wanted his reaction, but obviously, nobody didn't get enough time for us to talk. But the former president, John Dramani Mahama, has been reacting on what has just happened in Parliament. Maxwell Agbaba is with him on his tour. Let's bring that reaction in and see what's happening. So let's listen to what the former president has said in relation to what has happened in Parliament.
I am hearing from Parliament is true, then something historic has just happened. The report I am hearing is that the Speaker has declared 4 seats vacant. Of the 4 seats, 3 are from the MPP and 1 is from the NDC. So if those seats have been declared vacant, then it means in the life of one Parliament, the minority has turned to the majority and the majority has turned to the minority. So for me, God is even showing a sign of what is going to happen. Because even before we have cast one single ballot, the NDC has become the majority.
All right, so that is the former president reacting to what is happening. Well, anyway, let's see how it goes. But Evans, more people are reacting to, the conversation we just had with. We're right to call him the minority leader, aren't we?
No, he is the minority leader.
He is the minority leader.
I mean,
now.
There's a reason why he stood on his feet in Parliament and attempted to challenge the Speaker's position. And he's gone to the Supreme Court. There's a reason why they've left the House. They've left the floor of the Parliament as and when this was happening. The Speaker's ruling was quite clear.
Yeah.
Now, where did the Speaker draw his power? It is in their own standing orders that the Speaker, when he's in the grey area, he is the alpha and the omega on the subject of rulings. You can challenge his position, but until you successfully challenge and overturn it, either through the parliamentary process or through the courts, what he declares and he rules is the law of the land in Parliament, as far as Parliament is concerned. And so as we speak tonight, his ruling is simple, that the 4 members of Parliament, their seats are vacated. And the implication of that is that the NPP has lost 3 seats. The NDC has lost 1 seat. That places them in the majority, as in the NDC majority, and the minority side is now the majority side. And so he becomes the minority leader until he successfully gets the Supreme Court
to overturn
that. Next week when Parliament returns, and that, by the way, they've adjourned this until Tuesday, I expect that the NDC side will sit in the majority seat. If they don't return, the House will proceed. What they need to, of course, get the House to work is a quorum. And the numbers that the minority side, of course, now the majority side, the NDC side, they have quorum to do business.
Yeah.
But of course, as we know, it's the government that takes of course, unless it is a private member's motion, the government will send its business to the House, and normally you send it to the leader of government business, or a minister will have to go there. What they will have to then do, I think is what you're saying, is that until this is decided by the Supreme Court, they're not going to go to Parliament with any business, which is the point he's making to you, that this has affected government business anyway. But there are already bills and other business before the House that is being considered. Parliament, because it's now within the domain of Parliament will have to proceed with those, the business as it is, and see it through. So all these other legislations and bills that, and remember, and because we're talking about galamsey over the last few years, that LI 2462, which everybody has been talking about, the government said they're going to start the processes to try and repeal it. What it means is that that's one of the that will be one of the victims of this.
Yeah.
Although it's part of the conditions that led to organized labor saying we're backing off and watching you proceed to have it repealed. What has happened tonight in effect is that the government will no longer proceed with that process because they have to go to the Parliament to say we want to repeal this. That's one of them, obviously, and there'll be a host of other government business that will not move, but it doesn't stop Parliament from still functioning. Now, one of the grey areas, and we still have on the line with us Dr. Rashid Rahman to tell us, to sort of clarify for us, is without the government of the day, the executive government, taking business to the House, can Parliament function? I mean, and what will the minority side be deliberating on when they go to the House? Of course, one way to look at this is if they have business already before them, they will take it. But if the government of the day does not bring the business, what will the House do? I mean, it's a question. I mean, listen, this is an uncharted territory. We are all learning, and we will learn a bit more in the next few hours, days, and weeks until the Supreme Court comes with final clarity on the matter. And so we have to grope a bit. They have to elect a second deputy speaker. That's first of all, with 51 days on election. They have to reconstitute all committees in Parliament. Again, we haven't seen that happen with 51 days on election. If you like, stretch it. With the life of Parliament just 2 months or just a little bit short of 3 months for it to expire, they have to reconstitute every single committee in Parliament. We haven't seen that before. How will that happen when you do not have the minority members, and by the way, when I say minority members, I'm talking about the MPP members of Parliament participating in the process, because they have to nominate their members to the various committees. But they say they don't want to participate in the House. In other words, there is an indefinite boycott of Parliament by the MPP side that is tonight in the minority, leaving the House to, of course, the NDC side. This, obviously, as we've been saying, if it is joining us, is a major breaking news story. We haven't seen this transpire before. It's completely uncharted territory, constitutional questions being raised. We will see how quickly the Supreme Court gets a sit and hear on this matter.
Well, on that bit, let's bring in a legal practitioner, Kojo Painter, to help us understand what we should all be expecting. Lawyer Painter, I'm grateful to you for joining us. Now, Afeo Markin says he's taking this case to court. Well, we don't know when the court will sit on, but if the court comes to overturn the ruling of the Speaker, what happens? Hello, Lawyer Pinto.
Hi.
Yes.
I can hear you.
Good. So I was asking that if the Supreme Court overturns the ruling of the Speaker, what's next?
Oh, quite naturally. Then everything goes back to normal. Everything goes back to the way it was before, where we find ourselves now. It to be as simple as that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will it be a simple matter to arrive at in terms of the Supreme Court?
You know, the Supreme Court can make an arrangement for itself. I mean, we say that fundamental problems require fundamental solutions. Okay. And even though we've not been faced with this kind of situation, this is what makes us a dynamic, human institution. That is to say, we have to change to reflect the situations that we find ourselves in. And even though I have no reason to believe that anybody contemplated this, I believe believe that the Supreme Court can rise to the occasion by making certain rulings in very quick succession or quick times to reflect the mood, or rather the problem in which we find ourselves. So I have no doubt whatsoever that once the appropriate applications are brought before the Supreme Court will appreciate and know that we are not in normal circumstances, and I have every reason to believe that they will rise up to the occasion. So I've got no doubt whatsoever in my mind about what the Supreme Court can do to rise to the present challenges that we have to our Constitution. I have no doubt whatsoever.
But if you look at Article 97H, if he was elected a member of Parliament as independent and joins a political party, I mean, isn't it straight? Is this ambiguous that the Supreme Court should make pronouncement on?
You know, you consider it straightforward, but then we have a dispute, and the dispute about is between learned people, between all kinds of, between Speaker of Parliament. But I can tell you this: I have no doubt whatsoever in my mind that the Speaker of Parliament is so wrong and so definitely wrong that I will not even attempt an explanation, except to hope that the Supreme Court will have the earliest opportunity to make a pronouncement on the issue, because no interpretation can be placed upon those clauses to suggest that if somebody intends that he does not want to be with the same party with which he entered into Parliament at this current session, he then has declared himself out. There are clear positions for resignations. There are clear situations for even the party itself finding itself in a situation where it wants to dismiss that member from its own party. And if none of these have been invoked, no interpretation can be placed on those clauses. I'm talking about G and H to give it the interpretation they're given. And you see, I like to illustrate it by very simple, if you permit me, very simple illustration. You know what? Under law, for instance, I want to use the institution of marriage as an example. Once you go through an ordinance marriage, nothing can happen between the two people for the marriage to be said to be dissolved unless by a court of law. In other words, however the parties, the people decide to live, the husband and wife, and whatever it is, it only takes a court of law to dissolve that kind of marriage.
Okay, but stay on with me. But let me bring in Harun Adrusu, who is joining us on phone. He's MP for Tamale South. I'm grateful to you for joining in here. Now, you were the genesis of all of this, because you indicated that you wanted to move for the NDC to be declared vacant because they've gone against what the rules are. I mean, I'm sure you've had your objective, you've achieved your goal, right?
112.
Okay. Mr. Adrusu, can you hear me? Do I have you with me?
Yes.
Great. So I was asking that once you were the originator of this, you indicated that you wanted to get a speaker to declare this seat as vacant. Your objective has been achieved.
Thank you very much. It's not a matter of personal grandiose. It's about the Speaker upholding constitutional supremacy in Ghana, upholding the values of our Constitution, protecting our democracy, and enriching our democratic ethics and tenets. Subject to the Supreme Court, when I first mentioned this matter, I indicated that if the Speaker ruled otherwise, I would have gone to the Supreme Court to test the law on the matter. But Precedent makes it conclusive that this is what should happen to the Parliament of Ghana. The four must vacate their seats. I've heard arguments elsewhere that they haven't defected yet. When will they defect again? If you run to Parliament and shift posts, whether from a political party to independent or independent to a political party, is within the tenure. Fortunately, the Speaker haven't declared the seats vacant. The Electoral Commission will naturally have conducted by-election. But Article 1126 saves the country that if the period to a general election is less than 3 months, there shall be no election. So the seat shall remain vacant until the presidential and parliamentary elections of December 7th and until a new parliament is sworn in on 7th January. Be the provisions of Article 112 subclause 6. So I think that parliamentary democracy is better enriched today. Our parliamentary and constitutional jurisprudence is better enriched today. And I'm happy for our democracy. Let's see what the majority will do. At least the bane of Ghanaians is, what do we do to end galamsey? What does an NDC majority, what will be an NDC majority to that? Ending galamsey. And then over borrowing, what will be an NDC majority response to that? At least President Akufo-Addo is now walking on two fractured legs, exiting as president, lame president, and now not having control of parliament, where many of his decisions are subject by oversight to parliament. So a day of joy for Ghana's democracy, not Haruna Idrisu. I swore to uphold the constitution at all times.
Okay. Now the now minority have indicated that they are not willing to do business in the House. If you go to the House on Tuesday and they do not turn up, how will the House run?
That means government has no business. The country will still run. Parliamentary business will run. Government business may not be able to run. Their best forum is to go to the Supreme Court, which has exclusive jurisdiction over the interpretation of the Constitution, and will all be bound by any decision of the Supreme Court. But I'll be surprised if the Supreme Court took any decision to the contrary.
So you don't expect the Supreme Court to overturn this ruling?
I don't anticipate it, given precedent, given our history, and given the plain, ordinary meaning of the words used in Article 97, 1G and 8. They are unambiguous provisions. The words does not cause confusion in the mind of any person or create any ambiguity as for the Supreme Court to be looking for the secondary meaning of the words there. I don't see it, but I respect the authority of the Supreme Court, and particularly their exclusive jurisdiction for the matter. But there will be no violence. There is no, there will be no, we are still at Article 1. Thank you.
Will you be disappointed if the Supreme Court overturns this ruling?
It also enriches our constitutional jurisprudence. The decisions that are made today will guide us into the future. America's democracy is over 200 years. We are just 30 years. So what is it that the Supreme Court can do to strengthen our democracy? We look forward to that.
What happens to the second deputy speaker position now?
I'm not interested in discussing those. I'm interested in upholding the values and tenets of the Constitution.
Okay, all right. Grateful to you, Haruna Idrisu, for joining us here. Let me bring in Dr. Rashid Rahman. Dr. Rashid Rahman, so how do you expect the House to run if the now minority group say they are not willing to do business with the now majority?
Fortunately, we are in an era where private members' bills are allowed. Just today, we were at the Kempinski Hotel, as civil society leaders contributing to a bill, a private members' bill on international transactions and loans and the role that Parliament ought to play. This is a private members' bill, and from my understanding, Parliament intends to consider this bill before it rises. So things like that could be subjects that Parliament can deal with in the meantime, before any government business comes in. But I mean, the long-term consequence of it might be that if bills like this eventually pass into law, maybe the president might not want to have anything to do with it, as we saw in the case of the LGBTQ bill and other bills that the president has not assented to. So Parliament could continue to function and do its work. I think they have a lot of work that they can do. But when it comes to maybe the role of the executive in some of these, to give them finality, we might face some problems. But let me go back to the main issue and to say that, I think in all these, tempers are very high, emotions are very high. One side is jubilating, the other side is not quite pleased. We saw the walkout and so on. But I would say, I think at the end of the day, is dialogue that is going to take us out of this difficulty, especially at a time when we are preparing for elections. And then also, I think this might also be a lesson for the two parties, because we have to ask the question at this point, what has given rise to this? And I think you analyze this, it goes back to, some of the kind of how parties handle candidates and so on. This is not the first time we are seeing this. What caused the precedent was how Honorable Esiama was treated by his party. And I think that lesson did not come home very well to the two parties. And we have seen a repetition, and we might see a repetition in the future. So for me, I think the parties have to learn lessons. And the NDC, I've heard the flag bearer and the supporters jubilating. I think they also have to take note of this and be careful, because precedents are being set so that in future, whoever is in government doesn't get caught up, because they can repeat the same mistakes, and as we have seen in this instance.
We've also been joined by constitutional law lecturer, Professor Kojo Asare, who's just joined us. Prof, I'm grateful to you for joining us. Now, this is quite an interesting development in our politics and in our how we do practice our democracy. For you, how did this come to you as someone who is versed in the constitutional law of our country?
Hello?
Prof.
Hello, nothing to Mr. Ansari.
Mr. Ansari.
Yes, please.
Okay. Now, I want to find out from you. You do have, a lot of understanding in terms of, our constitution and how we're governed by these laws. How did this ruling by the Speaker come to you?
Well, thank you very much. I wasn't surprised at all. What we need to understand is that Parliament has its own standing orders. It has its own regulation, its own procedure. And whatever Parliament does in conformity with their laid down procedure cannot be challenged in a court of law. Or that we should expect the Supreme Court to overturn the ruling of the Speaker on a matter that was regularly before the House, that was debated in accordance with the standing orders of the House, that received the Speaker's ruling, communicated in accordance with their standing order 74, rule 1 and 2, and their standing orders came into force this year. Just this year, they made the standing orders for themselves. And my understanding from what the Supreme Court ruled in the J.H. Mensah case was that whatever Parliament does in the exercise of its authority that is lawful cannot be challenged before any court of law. That's my understanding. And therefore, if the Speaker has spoken and the Speaker said that he has communicated in accordance with the standing practice of the House, and he emphasized that since 1993, this has been their procedure. How does one challenge such practice in the Supreme Court and hope to win?
Okay.
It's not possible. We are practicing separation of powers. each arm of government is a domain in its own right. So just as the executive cannot be faulted when they take executorial decisions, so may we also expect that whatever Parliament does in the regular exercise of this jurisdiction cannot be questioned. It is only when they go beyond their powers, when it becomes ultra-virus, that it can be questioned. But if it is within, as I'm sure they did this afternoon, it's unfortunate. The majority, try to highlight the fact that they were not given a hearing. One would therefore say that the rules, the alteram partem rule was breached. But how was it breached? It was debated. Each side was given the opportunity to speak, and then the speaker made his ruling.
But the former speaker, Professor Michael Quay, said those who were affected or who were going to be affected by this ruling should have been given a fair hearing. The 4 MPs whose seats have been declared vacant now, that's where the former speaker was saying those people need to be given a fair hearing. Not necessarily the majority side of the House, but those who are affected.
Fair hearing as to what? As to the fact that they cross carpet, or the fact that there will be consequential nullification of what they did, or if it was validated, then NDC will be the consequences. I don't see the problem here. They were heard, all right. The EC examined their documentation, right? Their internal rules, that's the internal rules of their political parties. And what they should capital at, not the speaker's ruling. If you cross carpet, the consequences that your seat will be declared vacant, and this is not the first time that the speaker is declaring a seat to be vacant. Mike Okwe, I mean, when he was speaker, I believe that the same thing happened. The same, and it's precedent. So what the House does today, they should be mindful that in 10 years' time, the same thing will play back. So if they expect a certain pattern, then both houses should agree on a certain format. That is, before we declare a seat vacant, we'll invite those directly affected. I cannot, say here because I don't have the full details, whether they were invited or they were not invited. I can't because I don't have those facts. But speaking as a lawyer, I believe that the electoral rules have been met. I don't think that by not calling them for a one-on-one discussion, the rules were breached. Not at all.
So you don't agree with those who argue that the political parties that these MPs belong to should have been the one calling for their seat to be declared vacant and not necessarily a member of parliament asking for?
No, it is an activity that is carried out by the EC and Parliament. So the EC and both houses of Parliament.
All right. So your expectation is that, the Supreme Court will not overturn this ruling by the Speaker?
I don't think so. I can't see how the Supreme Court, can all of a sudden decide to lay down rules and regulations for Parliament. We are practicing separation of powers. The legislature has its own province, the executive has its own province, and then the judiciary. So the judiciary is to interpret the law. It is not to make laws for Parliament or regulate how Parliament goes about its daily parliamentary business. It's none of the function of the Supreme Court or for that matter the judiciary. They don't have that power. if they make any pronouncement that will be inconsistent with the letter and spirit of the Constitution, it will be void ab initio. Simple. The House and the standing orders of the House were agreed upon by the Parliament of Ghana, and it came into force on 2nd January 2024. They made it for themselves. The Supreme Court had no hand in it, nor the executive. So they've laid their bed, let them lie in it, period. But we have a precedent in the famous case of J.H. Mensah, and that's the MPP. So we have had precedent.
But I mean, if you look at Article 97G, the second part of it says, seeks to remain in Parliament as an independent member. I mean, was it referring to the current or the future? Because these people say they have not left their party. They are only filing to run as independent for the next Parliament, not the current one.
Yes, but when we make rules for the present and the future, isn't it?
Yes.
We don't make rules for the past. We make rules for the present and the future. So what they are saying is that there's, if you cross carpet, and this thing, should have been obvious to the both parties, especially the MPP, when the young man, who sided with them and was elevated to the position of second deputy speaker, they ought to have known that in itself was faulty, it was questionable, but they remained silent on it. And now it's played back adversely for the MPP. Adversely for the MPP. Now, all politics aside, we are building a democracy. We are building a democratic culture. And in times of political transition, before and after, the role of the judiciary becomes very, very critical. And this is one of the moments. But the judiciary is not, to be seen to be interfering in order to make, a particular political party dance around in Parliament House and then later subsequently on the street. No. Theirs is to interpret the law. Can they regulate the internal procedures of Parliament? The answer is no, they cannot.
Wow, interesting days. I mean, it's quite interesting because the now minority group also believe that the Supreme Court could help them. But let's listen to what the Speaker said exactly when he was making the pronouncement.
Okay, thank you.
Vacancy has occurred. Honourable members, it is important to note that the determination of whether a member of Parliament has resigned from their political party or has joined another party is a matter of fact. In 2020, during the tenure of Right Honourable Professor Aaron Michael Quay as Speaker of Parliament, a notable instance occurred when the New Patriotic Party notified the Speaker that the Member of Parliament for Formina, Honourable Andrews Asiema Amwako, was no longer a member of the party. The MPP requested that the seat be declared vacant in accordance with Article 97(1) of the Constitution, citing that the Member of Parliament had filed to contest the upcoming elections as an independent candidate, which violated the party's constitution. In response to this request and notification, Right Honourable Professor Aaron Michael Quay proceeded to declare the seat vacant. However, I must emphasize that this ruling made by the previous speaker does not bind other speakers, including myself. It is important to point out that in the present matter before the House, the notice of poll is available at the Electoral Commission on all the 275 constituencies. I have duly taken note of the notice of the poll, and furthermore, no member in making comments to the statement made to the House by the minority leader denies these glaring and notorious facts. And so, what is my role in all this? Honorable members, it is important to point out that the Speaker is called upon by the standing orders of Parliament, particularly Order 18, to inform the House of the occurrence of a vacancy of the seat of a member under Clause 1B to E, G, and H of Article 97 of the Constitution. Accordingly, I proceed to inform the House that by the notification of the polls, the following members of Parliament have by their actions vacated their seats in Parliament. The members are Honorable Peter Yao Kwache Aka, NDC MP for Amenfi Central in the Western Region, now referred to as an independent parliamentary candidate for the same constituency. 2, Honorable Andrew Amwako Asiama, independent member for Fomna constituency in Ashanti Region, now referred to as MPP parliamentary candidate for the constituency. 3, Honorable Kojo Asante, MPP MP for Suhum in the Eastern Region, now referred to as independent candidate for the same constituency. And finally, Honorable Cynthia Mamile Morrison, MPP MP for Agona West constituency in the Central Region, now referred to as independent candidate for the same constituency. These MPs cannot be allowed by law and my good self to continue to pretend to be representing people that they don't believe in and they don't have any loyalty for in this House any longer. The House is accordingly so informed. Honorable members, I thank you for your patience and attention.
Well, so that was the Speaker declaring those 4 seats as vacant. Well, my colleagues Kweku Asante and Maxwell Agbaba joining us. Kweku Asante joining me from Parliament, and Maxwell is joining us on the move because he is on the entourage of former President John Mahama. Let me come to you, Maxwell Agbaba. Maxwell, okay, so I'm told I have to start with Kweku. Kweku, we understand that the House, I mean the minority, the now majority indicated that there has to be some arrangement and all of that that has to be done in terms of the committees. But let's start with the business that the House has to do. What businesses does the House have to complete from now to, let's understand the business that they have to do.
Well, there are a number of key government business that the majority will be seeking to get their numbers to do. The now minority, as you referenced. And there is 2 persons, our President Akufo-Addo, appointed to the Supreme Court. That decision has not been taken. Those persons have still not been approved to go onto the Supreme Court bench. That is still outstanding. There is the matter of $250 million IBA facility for the Ghana Financial Stability Fund. That has also not been decided. There is the matter of nearly $350 million worth of tax waivers. That has also not been decided. There is the matter of a number of bills that are being considered. In particular, there was this EPA bill and a number of them that have still not been considered, which are currently outstanding. And then ultimately, there is this issue of a number of key business that government itself has put before the House. It has been seeking to sort of get an understanding of how exactly they were going to get that through. So all of these businesses are currently outstanding, and the majority side, then the MPP side, were seeking to get their numbers to be able to get these numbers through. Mind you, Parliament itself was going for just about 3-4 weeks before it takes a break for the election and then return on the midnight of 6th January to be sworn into the 9th Parliament. But all these matters now particularly complicates matters for the majority side as to whether or not they are able to get the business through. Because the NDC minority, and you've heard Dr. Teselato saying, you heard Samuel Okujeto Black, they say it is not going to be business as usual. And this key government outstanding business, which the majority, the majority of the Alexander Afenyo Markin have been at pain to explain that these were outstanding matters they wanted to deal with before the House goes on break. All of them now caught in a political melee, all of them now in limbo, because with the exception of the vote on the Supreme Court nominees, which will be by secret vote, all the others will be by voice vote. And that one, the political parties are able to whip their members in line because no MP is almost always ready enough to stand up on their feet and be counted and say that they are in opposition to a stand that their side have been taking. So, Brace, those are some of the outstanding businesses that the House will have to do before it goes on break for the election and Christmas. But it appears some certain because with the minority now becoming the majority, and some of them on all these issues they disagree. The minority are in opposition to the $250 million loan. They are in opposition to the tax waiver. So all these are issues that the government is going to struggle the House with this new turn of things. And you were referring earlier to what exactly is going to happen. Ordinarily, we're expected to sit tomorrow, but that is not going to happen because the majority side, the now majority, the NDC side, you see that I'm struggling with the minority majority because it's and I'm struggling to pick the right word. The now majority moved the motion that the House will be agenda Tuesday. They want to use between tomorrow and Monday to firm up a name to be nominated for a second deputy speaker. Andrew Amakosi, having vacated the seat, the Parliament of Ghana now needs to elect a second deputy speaker, and there are already names going around, and the NDC say they're going to pick someone for that position on Tuesday when the House resumes. There's also expected to be the change of all the name tags in Parliament. The arrangement will now have to change. The NDP side will now have to go to the left side of the Speaker of Parliament, while the NDC side will come to the right side of the Speaker of Parliament and form the new majority. A number of these sitting arrangements will have to also be done. And if the majority are so minded and they are going to push through, you had Kojo Black and the minority, the new majority with Dr. Teselato saying, there has to be the new committees. The committees have to be reconstituted, and it will mean that the NDC will now chair a number of all the committees in Parliament for the business to progress. So that is how things are going to be in the House between now and probably the next 4 weeks when the House will take an adjournment. Government business really set to struggle in the House, Grace.
Interesting. You've been picking a lot of, reactions to this particular development. What have as we've heard from the leaders, what have the members been telling you?
Well, as usual, this is down the middle. It has become a political footballing game. In fact, I'm just at the office of the First Deputy, now Majority Whip, Ahmed Ibrahim, who insists that there's absolutely nothing wrong with the new declaration that have been made by the Speaker. But the minority, the NDP minority now insists there's everything wrong with what the Speaker has done, and they are going to hope that the Supreme Court will hear this matter expeditiously and set aside this declaration by the Speaker. Mind you, when Alexander Afenyo Markin, the now minority that filed its action at the Supreme Court, there was no return date. That means the court did not set a date. They had to wait for Parliament and other parties to be served for them to file their statements, among other things, before the court will set a date. These things ordinarily could take 14 days minimum. And the time is not on the NDP side. And I understand now they probably will be going to court to get an abridgment of time to ask the Supreme Court to bring this matter forward and hear them expeditiously so that these matters can be disposed of. They are really clear in their mind, the NDP minority now, that the Supreme Court of Ghana needs to intervene, that the Speaker of Parliament, Alban Bagbin, is completely wrong. In fact, some of them, like Haiti Amon, when I was interviewing him earlier on, actually now admit that Michael Quay was wrong in 2020. I was asking him, why didn't they say it then? Is it not a sign of hypocrisy that you basked in that, you enjoyed that, and now you are saying that the Speaker of Parliament then was wrong? They said, well, this is a legal question. It's not really about hypocrisy. It's not about politics. So that is the state of play in Parliament, Grace.
Quite interesting day in the House. We'll be making a lot of reactions and to see how this goes. But do still stay with us here on this particular show. Well, so Evans, we've been listening to a lot of these reactions. But Mr. Ansah makes it clear. He says it will be difficult for the Supreme Court to overturn what the Speaker has done.
Well, we'll wait for the Supreme Court to decide that, and the Supreme Court will have to go through that. And I think, for me, the biggest issue for the Supreme Court is not the decision, it is when they do it. if they do it, if they prioritize this now, ahead of, say, the LGBTQ bill before it, that is going to put the Supreme Court in the crosshairs of the political opponents, really. I mean, anybody else who watches the Supreme Court, it will actually expose the Supreme Court to significant questions. And for me, that is where the issue is. This is important for the government, but there are equally very important matters before the Supreme Court that they haven't sat on and deliberated on. So for me, the biggest challenge for the Supreme Court is not how they rule, whether they attend the Speaker or not. It is whether they prioritize this over other issues that we know that the minority have been pushing for a while, right? So they have to deal with that. They have to find a way of dealing with this, and I'm waiting to see how they deal with this in terms of the priority. Of course, the government is going to ask for an abridgment of time. I expect that to happen. To ask the Supreme Court to consider this urgently. And we know that unless they've done it in other cases, for me, that's where the controversy, to see how they cross that issue. And then there's a subject of the precedent. The precedent that Michael Quay had obviously done in the 2020, we know that became very controversial. In the case of the Andrew Siama, who is the second deputy speaker, whose position is now vacant, right? There's an element in that for me is interesting. That again will come up for conversation now that this has happened. Remember, we are beginning to unpack this. We're beginning to learn that this is uncharted territory. One of the key things is, in Michael Quay's ruling, I tried to pull up the Hansard, right, of what he exactly said. He seemed to hang his decision around the fact that the party itself triggered the process to sack him from the party, if you like, right? So they wrote to the party, then people wrote to the Speaker and saying that they have dismissed this man from the party because he went independent. You automatically forfeited his membership of the party. Once you forfeit your membership of the party, and the party has sacked you, in essence, you are no longer there on the party's ticket. And so you, in essence, will have to vacate your seat. I want to read that part. Having forfeited the membership of the party, and this is quoting from the Hansard, having forfeited the membership of the party on whose ticket he was elected to Parliament, the operative language of the Constitution is that he shall, which is mandatory, vacate his seat in Parliament. Now, the question, obviously, when they go to the Supreme Court, maybe to argue this point, that in this case, the party had not taken the decision in all the four cases, as we see, to say that the Cynthia Morrison, the Suhum MP, and Mr. Kwachi Aka have all, in essence, we have taken this next step, which is to sack them. And so we've written to the Speaker to trigger that process. This process was started by another member of Parliament. And that then becomes the issue. And remember the point we've made at the beginning, that the constitutional provision itself, on the question of if he seeks to remain in the House, again, is the question of if he seeks to remain in this Parliament or the next Parliament. Again, is the question that needs to be resolved. Very interesting days ahead, and the ball is in the court. Look, if you're a Supreme Court judge right now, if you're the Chief Justice, I don't envy you, because this is going to come before you. You have to first decide when to do it. Are you going to put it ahead of the LGBTQ, and what will be your reason for doing so?
But mustn't the issues be divided into two? Because for instance, if you look at the age, in terms of the independent member of Parliament, it says if he was elected as a member of Parliament member of Parliament as an independent candidate and joins a political party, is that not straight away?
Yeah, I mean, that's straight away. That's the point I made at the beginning. As for Andrew Siama, in this case, as we speak to them, I'm talking about the three MPs.
The other three.
The three MPs who are gone independent, right? But in Siama's case, is for me, and of course, I wait for the Supreme Court to decide on this. It's subject matter for the Supreme Court to decide. But on the face of it, it looks pretty black and white. And that if he was elected a member of Parliament as an independent candidate, stop there. Was he elected to Parliament as an independent candidate? The answer to that is yes. And then go to the second part. And joins a political party. Has he joined a political party? Yes, he has, because he's now running on the ticket of the MPP in Fomena. So for me, it's cut and dry, it's black and white in his case. There may be a gray area on the three MPs in question who, of course, have gone independent, although they are in this Parliament. On the ticket of two in the case of the MPP and one in the case of the NDC. The Supreme Court will have to decide that, in essence. But this is obviously a day that it's historic indeed. and we'll see how it plays out.
17th of October 2024 will definitely go down in the history of Ghana. But let's listen to former President John Dramani Mahama again on his reaction to this news, and then we'll cross over to Maxwell Agbaba.
Hearing from Parliament is true, and something historic has just happened. The report I am hearing is that the Speaker has declared 4 seats vacant. Of the 4 seats, 3 are from the MPP and 1 is from the NDC. So if those seats have been declared vacant, then it means in the life of one parliament, the minority has turned to the majority and the majority has turned to the minority. So for me, God is showing a sign of what is going to happen. Because even before we have cast one single ballot, the NDC has become the majority.
All right, let's bring in Maxwell Agbaba, who's traveling with the former president. Maxwell, so at what point in time was the former president told about this development, and what was his reaction?
Well, the party supporters had gathered at the Phone Methodist School Park, waiting his arrival. That earlier he had engagements with other stakeholders elsewhere. So all of the party supporters were gathered at the Phone Methodist Park. He was not present there. So just when he arrived on the ground, his spokesperson, Joyce Bar Mukhtari, went closer to him and whispered into his ears what had happened. Standing very close to her was the Deputy Minority Chief with Comfort Doyo Kojo, who was also, with Joyce Bar Mukhtari. So the two of them gave him that information, and you could clearly see the excitement, on his face. But even before they announced to him what had happened, the minority chief, the Deputy Minority Chief Whip, had told the party supporters the news and information that he had just received from Parliament. And at that point, the rally ground at the Phone Methodist School Park was raptured into a state of hilarity, into a state of uncontrollable excitement. All the party supporters spontaneously started singing the NDC anthem. Some of them who I interacted with said they believe that this is a victory before the December victory, and they told me that that is why they are celebrating. So when the NDC presidential candidate arrived and the information was given to him, you saw the excitement on his face. That was the first thing he talked about when he got the opportunity, to speak to the party supporters who had gathered at the Phone Methodist School Park. Also, Joyce Bar Mukhtari also had opportunity to speak to the supporters before the arrival of the NDC presidential candidate. She said, "Coach, and just like that, God is working for the National Democratic Congress." He has left, the NDC presidential candidate has left the Kokantomanso constituency. The team is set to arrive shortly here in the Tema Central constituency. We arrived here, the press arrived here just some minutes ago, and the news is also here. I just had the MP telling the party supporters to get ready and that they are going to celebrate the news that had just reached them, from Parliament. So for the NDC people, for the party supporters who we've been speaking to, the refrain for them is that this is the victory before the December victory break.
All right. Let's see how it goes. But what has the mood been ever since this happened? Has it changed? How did it look like in the morning? Has there been any difference?
Well, since morning, the NDC presidential candidate has been responding to some comments made on the campaign trail by President Akufo-Addo, and that sort of injured his supporters, excited the base of the party, who say they are very happy with the responses that the NDC presidential candidate had given to President Akufo-Addo. So this came more or less like a booster. Often when you reach the campaign grounds, when the party people are waiting for the presidential candidate, then the presidential candidate, the press team is part of that advance team that takes the lead. So the excitement is there. But when he arrives on the ground, the excitement usually reaches a different crescendo. I saw something quite different today. The excitement reached uncontrollable levels today when then the presidential candidates arrived on the ground. Obviously, because of the news that had been given to them by the deputy minority chief whip about what had just happened in Parliament. So the excitement was, I would say, a quadruple of what we've been used to on the campaign trail.
Okay, all right. Grateful to you, Maxwell Agbagba there. We still have Lawyer Pintle on the line. Lawyer, so just in wrapping up with you, you heard Mr. Kweku Ansah there. He says it will be difficult for the Supreme Court to make a pronouncement on this. But what's your own expectation of what the Supreme Court can do in this matter?
I fundamentally disagree with him. Because this is an issue bordering on interpretation of the Constitution. And it is only the Supreme Court that has been given the power to interpret the Constitution. Whatever the Speaker has done is, in essence, an attempt to interpret, Article 97, F and G of the Constitution, of that section, that is G and H rather. And what he did is an interpretation. He sought to interpret by placing facts and evidence and this, and even the very example that he gave, it does not fit. The example he gave of the MP for Mina was a person that had been removed by the party. And therefore, what he did at the time was proper. So I fundamentally, because this is a constitutional matter, it may come up in the Constitution, I don't even have to emphasize how heavily or how greatly I disagree with him, but it's a question of time. And I believe you keep a record of what he said and what will eventually transpire in the Supreme Court. It can never be the case that when it comes to an interpretation of the Constitution, the Parliament of Ghana is that independent. It is not. I know they have their own working rules and so forth and so on, but in the way that it is interpreted, the way that it is meant to work for them, in the sense that it affects, any portion of the Constitution that we have, the Supreme Court will always wade in. They are the only body they have got the constitutional right to interpret the Constitution, including subsidiary legislation. So I want to make it short on that one.
You do agree with him when he talks about maintaining the independence of the legislature?
In theory and in practice, the three arms of government are independent of each other. But it's only the Supreme Court that's got the power to interpret any law in this country. No part of Ghana, no body of government, whether the legislature and the executive, can remain free from the Supreme Court's constitutional interpretation. They cannot. So that if a day comes and Parliament decides that, there's this popular thing that we all learned in secondary school, that the only thing that Parliament cannot do is to change a woman into a man and vice versa. That is a white lie. It's subject to the interpretation and the power and authority of the Supreme Court to do that interpretation. So none of them is exclusive. None of them can escape the eye of the Supreme Court when it comes to that. But it's just a question of time. He's giving some particular examples, which are, with due respect, I don't find necessary to go into. But then, this is a clear case where I believe that over the next 1 month, a lot of things are going to happen in the Supreme Court that will lay credence to what I say or what he says or what anybody says. So I would just pray that we all become patient and then see how things roll. But I'd like my views to be heard on this matter, which is the fact that what the Speaker of Parliament has done today essentially amounts to interpreting this portion of the Constitution based on his own understanding, which, of course, I fundamentally disagree with on a matter of law, the question of interpretation. I believe that his interpretation is wrong from every aspect of the law. In any way, from all the canons of interpretation, he's damn wrong, and I said that. But because I'm just an individual like anybody who's entitled to his views, let's leave that for the Supreme Court to come.
Okay.
And when they speak, you can call me back, and we shall remember this discussion, and we'll know who was right and who was wrong.
Okay.
That is all I want to say.
Grateful to you, Lawyer Painter, for speaking to us here. Now, you know that all of this is based on a precedent that people have been citing in 2020 when the then Speaker of Parliament, Professor Michael Quay, declared the seat of the former MP as vacant. He's been explaining his decision, or what influenced that particular decision, to my colleague Elton Broby. Watch this.
The benefit is not his. The law does not stand to his annulment. That's why I talk about husband and a wife.
Meaning he has no locus in this matter
locus
because he doesn't belong to the MPP.
Because he doesn't belong to the party involved. Is it you who should say there's a problem in my house? You say there's a problem, I have a problem with my wife. And I'm saying I have no problem with my wife. What are you talking about? Because see, problems can arise in political parties. But they can talk and they can resolve them. It's not everything that comes within the political party that comes out. There may be trouble somewhere. We can talk about it. So it is the MPP that can trigger
the removal of these individuals from
their own
Parliament.
MP. Yes.
So for to put it in proper context, if Haruna Iddrisu wants something done, he can only do so as it relates to the only NDC member who is also, express his desire to contest an independent.
That is so.
But he cannot force the Speaker to declare the seats belonging to the MPP MPs vacant. This can only be triggered by the MPP as a political party.
By the MPP. And that's why I've given you the background of that legal provision. It is to correct a certain mischief that can be operated against political parties. It's not a matter of debate at all on the floor of the House. In fact, if you bring debate, you create a big problem. Because now you can always use a majority in Parliament to provoke a debate, and then they will start sacking the minority people. Is that not so?
Yes.
Because if you bring it as a debate and as a vote, then if you say aye, and the ayes are more than the nay, then the motion has been carried, and that person must be sacked from Parliament. What are you talking about?
Well, so that was the former Speaker of Parliament, Professor Aaron Michael Quay there. Evans, let's wrap up. But in wrapping up, what should be the takeaways from what has happened in Parliament?
Well, many of us woke up 2 hours ago, if you may now, knowing that Parliament is settled with the MPP being a majority, NDC being a minority. So if you're just joining us and wondering what has happened, what you see there on your screen, the Speaker has declared the seat of 4 MPs vacant, has significant implications. One is that the MPP is now in a minority. They are the minority party in Parliament, and the NDC is a majority party in Parliament. And the aye stance now is 136 for the NDC, 135 for the MPP. That also has implications for the second Deputy Speaker's position, because he's one of those caught in this particular web. And the Siama's position now as the second Deputy Speaker has also been vacated, because he's now no longer a member of Parliament. He's now the MPP parliamentary candidate for Fomena. And so he's also gone. So next week we expect that the majority side now, the NDC majority side has said, and this is all according to the Speaker's own ruling, and the Speaker is clothed with the authority to deliver the verdict. And so you can disagree with that all you want today. His ruling is law until the Supreme Court overturns it. So we speak based on the outcome, the verdict as delivered by the Speaker. And so his position now is that vacant seat, the vacant second Deputy Speaker position will now be subject to an election next week. The majority side say they'll do that among themselves next week. For the 3 MPs in question, their fate again rests with the Supreme Court. And we'll see what happens. They themselves also has calls to the Supreme Court to raise the subject up there. But then again, really you have 51 days to go. So why would you go to the Supreme Court to contest it? because you believe you will win, and that is why you went as an independent candidate. And so, again, we'll see. The question then becomes, somebody asks, if they vacated their seat, what happened to the representation
of their constituents?
Yeah. Because the constituents will need representation. And in every democracy, in fact, our constitution did not anticipate a time when citizens will not have representation in parliament. And that is why quickly, anytime there is a vacancy and an MP dies or resigns or whatever it is, there is a by-election as quickly as possible. And the constitution specifies the time frame within which the EC must necessarily organize a by-election. Unfortunately,
we've crossed it.
In this particular case, the constitution says you cannot hold a by-election when you have 3 months on election. And so we're going to have a situation now that the people of Fomena, the people of Suhum, the people of Memphis Central, the people of Agona West will not have representation because that can happen. And so we're going to have a vacancy for 4 slots there. Again, it comes back to the point you asked Kweku, parliamentary correspondent, government business. What will happen to government business? It's called government business because government must take the business to the House to prosecute. And that is how the checks and balances as far as the democracy has been structured. So you have the executive government, you have the legislature that must be independent of the executive, and you go to parliament with your business, and then they have to deliberate and make sure that, in fact, what you are planning to do is in the national interest. And that's why the architecture has been set up. So now we're going to have a situation where governments, the MPP side, and they form the executive government, say they're not going to take business to the House until the Supreme Court decides on the matter. But they already have pending government business before the House. That business will be prosecuted by the NDC side. And that for me is...
Why will it be prosecuted by the NDC side? Because if they go to Parliament, they will be there to prosecute this agenda, even though they...
That's my point. The NDC side is the majority side. And so they will be deciding the fate of government business before it.
Which issues we even take on the floor.
Exactly. I mean, and these are issues that are already before them, and Kweku mentioned a few of them that they will have to consider. In fact, I've heard whispers already that the first thing they will do on Tuesday, once they come and they form a quorum, is to repeal the
LI.
Not the LI, the e-levy.
Oh.
To repeal the e-levy.
Interesting.
So that is Wednesday. Because remember...
But do they have the numbers? They have 136 now. They have 136 now.
136.
And the MPP has 135. 136, is it enough to overturn that?
Well, the point about that is that they will put a vote. You have to start with a voice vote.
Okay.
And those who are in favor of it say aye. Those who are in favor no.
And then the no will be there.
Even if they have a quorum in the House, somebody must raise the quorum question before it becomes live for the Parliament to consider. Okay. There's nobody on the minority side, NPP side, to do that. And so that is a possibility that could carry.
Okay.
So we are definitely on uncharted territory on this particular subject. And the next few days, we'll see how this plays out. The final decision is in the hands of the Supreme Court. But even they are in a very difficult, tight spot. Not for me, not because they would possibly overturn this or reaffirm the decision that the Speaker had delivered, but it's the timing. The timing is everything. If today the Supreme Court decides to hear this matter expeditiously about the LGBTQ bill, it's going to be a big deal in terms of how people view the Supreme Court. Remember that they are our last line of defense when it comes to the Constitution and our democracy. And so they are in a tight spot. But look, don't forget, this is happening with 51 days on election.
Yeah.
It sets the election up to be even more contested because parties now know that your performance has consequences. This has happened because of the outcome we got in 2020.
Yeah.
Fundamentally.
Yeah.
Right? In the past, even if you knock off 4 MPs,
you'll be okay.
You'll still be okay. So again, the high stakes in this election, it's re-emphasized by this decision. And that is why I believe it goes way beyond as a decision. It also goes to tell us, sets us up for a very tense next few weeks into the elections.
Okay. What a day it has been. A day on which the members of Parliament from Memphis Central, Fomina, Suhum and Agona West went to Parliament or woke up as members of Parliament only for them to be declared as no longer belonging to the House because of their own decisions, which technically has rendered the then majority MPP side now in the minority because they have 135 seats, and the then minority NDC side now the majority because they have 136 seats. Interesting days ahead. Thank you for your company. We're grateful. This is still Joy News. There's more on myjoyonline.com.